All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's Strength and Powers. I thought an interesting topic for a video would be Phil Heath versus Kai Greene and the time that Kai Greene actually defeated Phil Heath. So when most people think of the Phil versus Kai rivalry, the first thing they think of is the fact that Kai took second to Phil at the Olympia multiple years in a row, and that the rivalry at the Olympia always resulted in Phil Heath winning, and a lot of people feeling like Kai Greene should have beat him, but this was not always the case. So before their Olympia rivalry started, Kai Greene actually decisively beat Phil Heath at the 2010 Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio. Now, as many of you may already know, the Arnold Classic is pretty much Kai's show. It's the biggest title he's won, and he's won it multiple times now. He won it in 2009, which was the first year that I went to the Arnold Classic. And then he would repeat and win again, and in that particular year, Phil Heath was also competing. So at that show, the top 6 competitors were Kai Greene in first, Phil Heath in second, Branch Warren in third, Dexter Jackson in fourth, Tony Freeman in fifth, and Ronnie Rockel in sixth. So aside from the top 4 guys, the lineup wasn't really that deep. I mean, Branch, Dexter, Phil, and Kai were pretty much the runaway top 4 guys. Tony Freeman and Ronnie Rockel, while they're great bodybuilders, they weren't nearly on the level of a Kai Greene or a Phil Heath at that point in time. Now, I can remember this Arnold Classic like it was yesterday. In 2010, Kai Greene's conditioning was amazing. This was probably one of the best physiques that we ever saw on Kai Greene. He looked even better than he looked at the Olympia that year. And I remember thinking he was the hands-down winner at that show. Now, keep in mind, in 2010, Phil Heath had not yet won his first Mr. Olympia. In fact, he wouldn't win it until the next year in 2011. So while Phil Heath was somewhat well-known, he wasn't really, the favorite going into this show. But he certainly did bring an Olympia caliber physique, or he was on the peak of having that Olympia caliber physique. This was one of the first years that I actually took photos of a bodybuilding show. So these photos you're looking at right now are photos I took from the audience at that show. While they're not the best quality, keep in mind this was 8 years ago. And I was probably about 15 or 16 years old when I was taking these photos. Now, this was actually not the first Arnold Classic that Phil Heath competed in. The first one he did would be in 2007, which would be 1 year after his pro debut. So he was pretty much still a rookie at that point in time. He only had 2 pro competitions under his belt, and he placed 5th at the 2007 Arnold Classic, and that was the year that Victor Martinez won. He would also compete again in 2008. He would take second to Dexter Jackson at the 2008 Arnold Classic, and that was the year that Dexter Jackson also won the Mr. Olympia. So for his second year as a competitive bodybuilder in 2008, that was not too shabby of a placing to place second to the reigning Mr. Olympia at a very high-level pro show. Then later that year at the Mr. Olympia, Phil Heath would crack the top 3 at the 2008 Olympia. Then his placings would drop in 2009 all the way to 5th, even though he took the year off and did not compete in the Arnold Classic in 2009. So even though Kai beat Phil before his Olympia reign and kind of early on in Phil's competitive career, make no mistake about it, Phil Heath still had an incredible physique. He was definitely a top-level Olympian, a top-level bodybuilder, and Kai Greene was still able to get the better of him at a major show like the Arnold Classic. So I thought this would make an interesting topic for a video because I don't know if a lot of people actually know that Phil Heath was in fact beaten by Kai Greene at the Arnold Classic back in 2010, because back then, like I said, Phil Heath wasn't as well known. And the rivalry between him and Kai wouldn't really get heated until later, so nobody really focused on Phil versus Kai until the Olympia rivalry when Kai was constantly placing second. And then another fascinating thing about this was at the 2010 Mr. Olympia, so this would be after the 2010 Arnold Classic, Phil Heath would beat Kai at that Olympia. So the winner of that Olympia was Jay Cutler. Phil Heath took second, Branch Warren took third, Dexter took fourth, Dennis Wolf took fifth, Ronnie Rockel took 6th, and Kai's placing dropped all the way down to 7th place. So all these guys that he had beaten at the Arnold Classic had now all beaten him at the 2010 Mr. Olympia. So I think a lot of people wrote Kai Greene off that year in 2010. But of course, the following year, all that would change in 2011, and Kai Greene would move back up to 3rd place. Phil Heath would defeat Jay Cutler for the first time and win his first Mr. Olympia. So you had Phil in 1st, Jay in 2nd, Kai in 3rd. And then the next year would be 2012, and that would be the beginning of the Kai versus Phil rivalry, and Kai would take second to Phil for the first time. So again, just thought this was a cool piece of bodybuilding history. Kai versus Phil is arguably one of the biggest and best rivalries in bodybuilding, and I think a lot of people may have forgotten or may not have known that their rivalry actually had a pretty humble beginning, with Kai actually defeating Phil early on in Phil's career. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.